ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, we're gonna be talking about X-Men Forever Part 2, written by Kieran Gillen, with art by Luca Maresca and color by Federico Blee. Let's go ahead and get the review out of the way for this book. This book is great. I feel it's an unnecessary book, but it is a great book. I think that, and if you've seen my video for Rise of the Powers of 10 #4, I'm not going to rehash really any of it here. My thoughts as far as the story of this, I would say, just to sum it all up in as few words as possible, it's a great story that just feels incredibly unnecessary, and a lot of this probably could have or should have been put in the core Rise of the Powers of 10 #4. That said, once again, still good, but that's my one little knock against it. The art here is great. Luca Maresca is doing a fantastic job and kind of maintaining some of that look and vibe from some of the issues of Immortal X-Men and so on and so forth. I really like that. I love a good consistent artist. And we also got Federico Blee on color, and I like the color that Federico uses. It's very, for me, lighter tones that aren't quite as, whereas like, in Rise of the Powers of 10, just kind of give you a little bit of a comparison. David Curiel uses very strong colors. Not to say that that means that, the ones that David Curiel does bad, just it's very different tones of colors. And I thought it was a nice contrast, considering these books are kind of supposed to play off one another, but also be kind of different. Getting into the meat of the matter, because once again, you could honestly kind of sum up a lot of my thoughts on this story from a narrative perspective on what I felt about Rise of the Powers 10 #4. This issue serves one other purpose outside of just expanding on Rise of the Powers of 10. It also serves as a method to kind of clean up what Xavier's doing. I talked about this in the other video for Rise of the Powers of 10 #4, but the fact that Xavier's for the streets, he's just kind of doing whatever and working alongside Orcus, unaliving humanity, helping them unalive humanity for that matter, in an effort to save mutants. This here kind of reminds you that there might be something deeper to what he's doing. Go back to that Rise of the Powers of 10 #4 issue. How did the mutants in the White Hot Room, the Five, how do they know to resurrect Rasputin 4? Or even Rachel Summers? The truth is, Xavier was the one who told them. He let them in on everything, and Destiny already knew anyway. It's even kind of vaguely hinted at, maybe even implied, that Destiny might have even given Xavier some inside baseball in the time that they were using the homunculus version of Mother Righteous and the real, genuine article Mother Righteous as a sounding board between both Krakia Atlantic and No Place X. The truth of the matter here is Xavier, while yes, he is out of pocket in everything that he's doing, there are characters who kind of put what he's doing in perspective. Exodus says himself, what would you not do to prevent your darkest future? Even when Rachel Summers is completely and justifiably upset that Xavier unalived her, even more justifiably angry that everyone in the White Hot Room knew this was gonna happen and didn't warn her. It's because things had to play out the way they needed to play out, as Destiny could tell anyone. Telling someone about the future is a very fast way to prevent it, and in this case, they don't want to prevent what's about to happen. They need it to happen. And I do appreciate they spent at least a couple of pages, technically, kind of going over this and cleaning this up. But getting back to it, yeah, I feel like they're going to try and paint Xavier in such a way that his decisions are morally complex. It's not just black and white, good versus evil, benevolence versus malevolence. It's not how this plays. It's still bad from an optics perspective, but Xavier has a method behind his madness. He's just trying to do the most good humanly possible, even if it means doing something bad. And once again, as I talked about with Magneto, what won't good men do to prove that they are good, to do what is right? And that's kind of where Xavier is right now. Magneto warned us all along. And not only did Xavier set up the resurrections of Rachel and Rasputin, he's also set up the resurrection of presumably every mutant that has been unalived since the Hellfire Gala. We see characters like Archangel, who was unalived and put out to pasture in Dark X-Men. Every mutant that we know for a fact has been dead since Hellfire Gala, or in the fallout of events since Hellfire Gala. All of those mutants are back with the exception of Jean, and that's because she can't be resurrected through normal channels under normal circumstances. Now, I know there's gonna be a part some people are gonna want me to maybe focus on, but I'm not going to, and that's the whole thing with Destiny. There's a point where Destiny implies there's a backroom deal that was made between herself and Xavier. That deal has nothing to do with what's going on here. It actually has more to do with events that took place in X-Men Origins Blue #1, which is a one-shot that recontextualizes the familial ties between Nightcrawler, Mystique, and Destiny. And I've already done a video for that, and if you want to know more about it, it's up here. You can go check it out. But that's basically what she's talking about here. And I don't think that deal is as important as some people might want to believe it is. This issue also is in a roundabout way paying off Dead X-Men's finale. That was one of my biggest criticisms of Dead X-Men. That just kind of ends. It doesn't really tie up anything. It just seems like an advertisement for this. What's happening right here is basically what it kind of felt like. When we get to this particular part of it, as we talked about in Dead X-Men, and once again, that's one of the, I don't really want to rehash, so if you've not been keeping up, the long and short of it is basically that during that series, Prodigy had become the host of a shard of the McCran crystal, which is a nexus of all reality, and even a shard is a part of a greater whole and is treated as a whole. He was able to use his power to obtain knowledge of all of Moira's past lives, and thus they were able to travel them because of that shard. Well, he lost that shard in the series, but he still has those memories, and because he has those memories, he now knows information about where the Phoenix is and how it was created, across all realities. Rachel is banking on using that information because, as she says, it's the blueprint for how to create the Phoenix. She's planning on recreating the Phoenix in this particular series, where, as was already hinted at in Rise of the Powers of 10, that Jean was about to come back to life. We saw the fire engulfing her. That fire didn't come from Rachel, though. It came from Hope Summers. Right now, Rachel is off on Krakoa proper, Krakoa Pacific, and she is helping the X-Men alongside Jubilee, Exodus, and Hope, which is kind of weird considering how all this kind of plays out. You don't want to think too hard about that. It's one of those things I think is kind of weird. Maybe they should have put Exodus in that main shot from Rise of the Powers of 10 #4, because it kind of makes it seem weird that Hope is here now, but she's been given a mission by Jean to help her in that regard, because Hope has set the Phoenix, or rather Jean, ablaze and seemingly awakened the Phoenix within her. But the problem is that the Phoenix was about to die. It was about to end permanently, or so it seems. That's why the Phoenix is terrified right now in its rebirth. Even though it is a being, an entity that is the embodiment of death and rebirth, the idea of a creature having that level of power, suddenly realizing their own mortality, that they could potentially cease to exist forever, that's a pretty big deal. And that's kind of what's going on here, and is why Hope runs off, I presume. Though the timing on it is kind of weird and I would say nebulous at best. I think some weird choices were made between both Rise of the Powers of 10 #4 in this issue on where people were and when. But yeah, this basically lends a little bit of credence to maybe why Jean is going to be the most powerful she's ever been, because she's going to be a Phoenix that is a brand new Phoenix, not a Phoenix that has been through all of the primordial stages of life across, millennia. This is a Phoenix that is, for all intents and purposes, starting back at square one. I don't think it'll be so much in terms of power, but it's going to make for some interesting character and storytelling dynamics in that upcoming Phoenix solo series. Like I said, I could be, completely out of pocket in, my assessment of that, but I feel like that will probably be something that gets played on some level or another. All in all, I feel like this story, well, I'm sure there's probably some things that I left out, but those were the main things I felt that were worth the focus. And I like it where it's going, at least. I like the commentary on the fact that even the smallest pieces of Krakoa that seem so innocuous, so unimportant in the grand scheme of things, I like the fact that Kieran Gillen took a moment to show Exodus and Kafka have a bit of a, heart-to-heart before everything, kind of falls apart. Because in the midst of all this happening, Krakoa Atlantic technically has to, quotey fingers, be sapped of all its life force and energy, and kind of leaving those mutants there to pick up the pieces in the white hot room. Presumably they're not going to return. They're going to be there, and because they were so quotey fingers unimportant, no one's going to remember them, or that they weren't important enough to even be bothered with. But it kind of is yet again another commentary on just Krakoa as a whole. I like why so many people think that, oh, they're going to use time travel to completely wipe Krakoa away and that it never happened, so that way they can carry on with business as usual. But that's not the case. And I feel like, I don't know how many times I got to say it, they're not going to do that. I mean, if they do, I will totally, eat the crow on it, but it just doesn't seem to be the case. They've literally said repeatedly in both the stories and the writers who have been in interviews saying they're not going to use time travel to just hand wave Krakoa away as if nothing ever happened. You have to have that. Otherwise, how would some of the things that are happening in From the Ashes even happen in the first place? It's kind of like how people like just so they get something in their head, just dead set. They're like, oh, we're going back to the mansion. We're not going back to the mansion. I mean, the mansion will be a thing, but it's not going to be what it originally was. It's not a base of operations for the X-Men. It's a prison in the From the Ashes era. So, there's that to contend with as well. I also like the tension between Rachel and the others in this, just, kind of going back to that earlier statement about how they handled Rachel, compartmentalizing the notion that everyone knew she was going to die, but didn't tell her. And yeah, you get it. You understand why she's upset, but you also kind of understand why she lets it go. Once again, what would she do in Xavier's position? And yeah, it's once again, I do feel like Kieran Gillen's doing a little extra heavy lifting to make sure you don't 100% hate Charles Xavier. He tries to give you at least a little something to kind of make him seem as though what he did wasn't entirely selfish, but also at the same time, this is Kieran Gillen and he loves Mr. Sinister. He loves writing Mr. Sinister. So of course, we see how Mr. Sinister comes back, as we saw in Rise of the Powers of 10 #4. Sinister is back and Rasputin wants to unalive him off rip. But here, that's not the case. I mean, yeah, she does want to unalive him, but we know why she doesn't. We know more why he's allowed to do what he needs to do, because he is the only person right now, presumably, who can communicate with Krakoa and get a message between the two islands to connect them in the way they were initially connecting one another when they were using both of the versions of Mother Righteous to send messages between mutants in two different places. But in this case, they're using it as a way to transport mutants. Using this, they're able to kind of create a new form of Krakoan teleportation system, which explains how Rachel, Hope, Exodus, Jubilee, so on and so forth, how they're able to get to Krakoa Pacific to aid the X-Men in the upcoming fight. That's kind of how all of this is, framed more or less. But yeah, all in all, this is a solid issue. Once again, I still feel like, this should have just been a part of the main story. It just is what it is on that front. I honestly cannot let that go. I just won't. I refuse. I'm just ready to get to the end. I'm ready for these last couple of issues of Rise of the Powers of 10 and Fall of the House of X to just get here, get us to the end, get us to where we need to be for From the Ashes, because I think it's time we get something fresh. And once again, I know people are going to be upset. I've heard it and it's noted, but I'm telling you, you may have loved Krakoa, and you can say that because you have experienced it. But until you experience what comes next, I don't think anyone can just say outright that they hate something because they haven't experienced it. And I can't say that I love what they have coming up, but I can definitely say that I am more interested than I am in anything that's going on in what's happening right now. Outside of like the core Fall of the House of X, Rise of the Powers of 10 stuff. It's difficult to care. And it would be nice to care again. And I feel like that's where I will probably find myself when we get to From the Ashes. I feel like I'll very likely care again, just based on, just what I've seen so far of it. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.